Good start. All right, guys, so we're going to talk a little bit about Snap Finance today. This is our project, sales, visits, data storage. So we're going to kind of talk about a problem in this space. So this is kind of like the structure of the deck. The first is like, who is Snap Finance? We're going to talk a little bit about like the company, like what the problem is, and then like what our proposed solution is. So yeah, it's kind of just like outlines what's going on, but we'll skip through this. So Snap Finance is headquartered in it's West Jordan, so they're out here in Utah, and they've been growing really, really quickly within the last couple of years. Actually, Katie's dad works in sales ops there, so that's kind of how we got connected with them. It's a really kind of interesting company. I don't know if you guys are familiar with like payday loans. I don't know if you guys have heard of that before, but like essentially what they do is they will work with merchants who will work with customers to get people with like low credit scores like qualified for like really quick loans up to like $3,000. So they actually have this acronym. It's called ALICE, and this is what they call all of their customers. It stands for asset limited, income constrained, and employed. So it's kind of like who their target customer is, and they refer to that like on their website. They talk about ALICE like all the time, which I think is really cool, actually. So the reason why Snap Finance is growing so quickly is they actually have a digital advantage over some of these like payday loan places. So if I'm a consumer and like I want to buy a new mattress that costs like $2,000, I'll go to the store and like I don't have money to pay $2,000, so I'll hop onto Snap Finance's like website, put in an application, and then like within seconds like they'll approve me, and then like they'll send me like a digital Snap card that has like $2,000 on it, which then I can use at the merchant. So then what happens is Snap is kind of like a bank. They'll pay the merchant. It's like this like mattress store, I guess, in this example. And then as a consumer, like I have a loan with Snap Finance. Hopefully that makes sense. It's kind of like a bank, but like for consumers, they kind of stay within this like $0 to $3,000 range for like loans. And so another competitive advantage that Snap Finance has over payday loans is like they've built a lot of trust with the consumers over time. I think, at least for me growing up, like I heard like tons of rumors about like these payday loan places that they're super sketchy, and like they definitely do charge high interest rates, but at least you can trust Snap Finance because it's like a legit company. It's not like a one little place. And then the last thing is it's just like a high risk, high reward, right? So they do charge like pretty high interest rates to their customers and to their users, but the idea is like, hey, we're taking on a pretty big risk by like giving you a loan because you don't have credit or you have bad credit, so like we have to charge a higher interest, and their kind of like thesis here is like they can get enough people who are going to pay back their loans at a high enough interest rate that it's going to kind of counteract these people who aren't able to pay back their loans. So anyways, it's kind of like some background on their business model and like what they do. This is kind of a map that like shows the relationship between the consumer, the merchant, and Snap Finance as a company. So they did actually close. I'm not super familiar with the industry, but they did close like it's kind of like a fund, I guess, and they got funded $1 billion to do these like little micro loans to these consumers. So they're growing really quickly, and they're pretty big actually. So yeah, that's just some history on the company.
Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about the problem with the current system that's right now. So first we have the customer, our area sales manager, which we refer to as ASM, and then our customer success manager, who we refer to as the CSM. And these are the three actors that we're primarily concerned about with this.
So basically the relationship is that throughout the lifetime of a customer, first they'll get sold, right? It's a bank, so there's not an actual like, I'm gonna pay $1,000 for a product. Rather, it's whenever the implementation happens. So that's the responsibility of the area sales manager, is that they close the deal and then they have a mandatory first visit to go set up the account at the consumer. So they actually fly out or drive or whatever, and then they visit the account. After it's all set up, the account is then transitioned to the CSM, the customer success manager. And they're in charge of implementation and training and making sure that the account is being used, and basically they just make a lot of money for the company, which is pretty cool. This is just, go ahead.
So this is an activity diagram of the current system. So as you can see, the ASM starts with making a sale. And then they work with the merchant, the client, to get the information that they need to complete this mandatory sales visit. So first they check that the sales agreement is signed, everything is ordered over there. Next, they fill out the customer's banking information to make sure that they can coordinate with that. As Ryan said, Snap pays them and then works with the customer themselves. So that's how that works. They verify they have a physical location to prevent against fraud. Then they do a demo practice application on their portal, Snap's portal, to make sure that the client knows how to interact with that in the future. Then last, they make sure there's signage in the merchant's physical location to advertise to customers that Snap financing is available. So those are the steps that they follow for each one of these sales visits, but the problem comes at the end. The ASM just leaves and there's no accountability, there's no tracking of these actions. And the CSM comes in and they don't really know what's been done, what hasn't been done. And the responsibility, even though it should lie with the ASM, it falls to the CSM to figure out where the gaps are in this process and what needs to be done and to get those things done on their own. So in further detail, this is the process in a use case description. Some of it is the same kind of information. The ASM is the main actor we're worried about here. As I said before, we have all three of them, but the ASM is the main person we're tracking that we're keeping accountable. Another issue with this process comes with the minimal guarantees and the success guarantees. So in this process, a minimal guarantee, if the process fails, nothing happens, no activity is tracked. The ASM may or may not complete those activities. They have issues where they'll just move on to the next client and there's no way to know, there's no way to track that. So that's a huge issue. And even so, even if they do successfully complete every single one of those tasks, there's still no concrete way to track that. The CSM would be prepared technically because the merchant would be ready to go. The CSM doesn't really know that. So those are the top things with that.
Great, thanks. So, kind of describe the current system. Basically, we took in all the information that Katie's talking about. Sales, the data isn't being tracked. We're there deliberating as a group for like a whole 5 seconds. We realized that there's an ASM CSM disconnect in this company, and we put that in quotes so we can quote ourselves in this presentation. But basically, that's the problem: is that an ASM goes and visits an account, but they don't record anything. They don't say if they went and put up signs on the account. They don't say if they actually installed Snap Finance into their computers. They don't say if they did any trainings. And this is a huge problem for the ASMs because their sales management doesn't really know what's going on. And the CSMs walk into the account and they have no idea what happened. So that's described in this slide here. Also, there's decreased customer trust. Like, if a customer receives this customer success manager, and they're just like, so what did the salesperson do when they visited you? It's not good. So our solution is that Snap Finance tracks this information, and they should do that by creating a Qualtrics survey with just a bunch of questions on it, such as who did you visit, what did you do this, and Aaron will get into that later. And then they should take those survey results and then integrate it with their homegrown CRM, which is called Snapback. The technological risk, now this is padded super heavily because we didn't get a chance to talk to like the development teams or anything like that. This is pretty simple. Qualtrics survey is not hard to create. It takes like 5 minutes. Integrating with an API can be a little bit more difficult, especially depending on the kind of databases that they use. So we said that the development was medium, just for unknown risk, pretty much. The project size is medium. The available technology, they have computers, so they don't need to buy anything. The economic impacts for this is that it does a lot of good for this company. Mainly because specialization between the ASM and the CSM. So that basically means like the CSM isn't going to come in to an account, figure out that the salesperson didn't do anything, and then have to spend time doing the salesperson job. And that's going to save the company money. Increased customer lifetimes, that means more money. And sales management visibility, the sales manager can make better hiring decisions because they'll be able to see who's doing what at each visit. If they're slacking off, then they're probably gonna fire them. But right now they don't know that, and that's what Katie's dad has explained to us. So now Aaron will talk about the details of the new system.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to talk about the details of this new system and kind of the more technical side of it. So there are 3 things that need to be done in order for this new solution to happen. The first is we have to create a Qualtrics survey that the area sales managers can use. Second, we need to store that data in their database so that they can use it later. And last, we need to take the data from that database and display it in a website, their current website. So these are some of the questions. We already talked about it a little bit of things that need to be in the survey that need to be passed. So if you'll notice, compared to the current system activity diagram, there was this little part that said like identify the gaps. And so the client success manager, he had to identify the gaps, and it causes problems for the company. So now all that information is transferred directly using this Qualtrics survey, which makes it a lot easier for the company. And here we see the database storage, so the things that need to be passed into the current system. You can go more. And right here, I want you to pay attention to this side right here. So it goes into the Qualtrics